All right, thank you everybody for attending the National Disability Employment Awareness Month webinar series that we were doing. The theme is access to good jobs for all. This week we are having Josh Cobbs from Autism Speaks. He is the Director of Employment Initiatives, and he's going to be talking about the resources that they have to support your guys' businesses, the communities, and the individuals to make inclusive workplaces. So I'm going to kick it over to Josh and let you take the lead.
Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it, and thanks for having me. And I do like active participation within the presentation. So if there are questions that pop up, please put those in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. So as Tyler said, my name is Josh Cobbs. I'm Director of Employment Initiatives. I'm also a fellow Iowan. So if I haven't met you yet, I certainly hope to at some point. And I'll send this out afterwards, but I've had the great privilege to be an Iowan for my life and work in different areas, including before coming to Autism Speaks, I worked for Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation in their Sioux City office, and specifically worked with pre-employment transition in high schools, and then some post-secondary programming for individuals who graduated but didn't fully complete their programming yet. So they had a few extra years to gain additional skills. And personally, I have 3 adults in my household, and I have 2 autistic adults. And so it's super important for me to have good jobs and opportunities for everyone, including in my family. And that's going to look different for the varying level of supports that individuals may need, and also the varying level of interest. So what you'll hear throughout the presentation is me talking a lot about strengths matching and how to line up as either if you're an employer or a job coach or so forth. How do you match those strengths, and what does that look like? And then how do you get some additional support maybe for coworkers or managers, et cetera. So, if you could, while we go through the presentation, if the chat's open, I'd love to know, you don't have to say exactly where you're from, but if you're from a business or if you're from a different community member, it'd just be nice to kind of get a representation of who's there. So I'm not going to cover this in detail. Autism Speaks, I'm super proud to work for them. We are a national organization, and we do work all throughout the country on employment, but also in other areas. So we're dedicated to creating that inclusive world for individuals with autism throughout their lifespan. And we do this through advocacy, services, and supports. That's the area in which I'm housed in. So I specifically work in the employment space, but we also have individuals within our space that work with transition to adult and adult services, such as housing, et cetera. Research and innovation and advances in care for autistic individuals and their families. So we also, and this will be a resource at the end, have what we would call our autism response team, and that's an information referral for any individual who might have questions about autism, whether they're autistic or maybe you're an employer or you're a caregiver or even a teacher looking for additional information. So what we're going to just cover today, and again, please jump in when we get into the meat of this, because good conversations are good presentations. So we're going to talk just generally about information about employment. So why is it important if you're an employer or working, for a different agency to get individuals with autism employed? Well, we'll talk about those numbers, and then we'll also talk about some of the benefits. We're going to talk about strengths-based employment, a few ideas we can kick around of where you can start. We're going to talk about employee and training, and then additional resources. So great. Love seeing different businesses and participants on the call. So that's really great. So why is it important? Well, I always jokingly say I want to get all my kids out of the house. And in order to do that, we have to have good employment outcomes and really good places for autistic individuals to feel comfortable and supported at. So as you can see here, only 20% of people with disabilities, including those with autism, are employed. So that's a huge gap. And we believe at Autism Speaks that all jobs are for all people, including neurodiverse and autistic individuals. And so what we want to focus in on is how do we help agencies and employers really create a welcome and inclusive environment where you're able to access employment no matter what you might want to do. So we'll do a few myth busters maybe later. It's not in the slides, but I do want to talk about those in general too, just some of the things that we hear. Companies that embrace best practices for employing and supporting more persons with disabilities outperform their peers financially. So that's a if you're in the HR recruiting space or in the talent acquisition space and you're competing in a highly competitive field, which in Iowa and frankly in most states, labor is highly competitive. Just think about what that could do for your landscape as you look at embracing more individuals with diverse needs. So in 2018, Accenture found out that companies that engage in inclusive hiring achieved 28% higher revenue, double the net income, and 30% higher profit margins. Those are big numbers. So, and again, these are just a few slides. We have more information out on our website about employment, making the business case, and so forth. So I'll make sure that you have that information as we go forward. And then this is the one that typically my HR and talent acquisition folks love is staff turnover is lower by up to 30% when you engage individuals with disability and inclusive hiring practices. That's not specific to autism, it's generally, but what a great stat that is, right? So before we go too much further, I want to talk about what we typically approach individuals from an employment side and from a job seeker side is how do we look at strengths differently? And if you think about back to maybe that K-12 system, so in education, individuals might be on a 504 or an IEP, and that's really to help them address maybe where there's deficits and how they can get the skills to close that gap, right? In employment, we really want employers and job coaches and so forth to really look at where is that individual's strengths and how can you match that with an opening of the position. I'm not going to read these word for word. Again, we'll provide this. This came out of Harriet Cannon Disability Services. They're a agency over in the UK, but if you think about strengths and then you start to think about, we all have these strengths in some capacity. We may not have as much in one bucket as the other bucket. But if you're looking at attention to detail, thoroughness, and accuracy, sure, who doesn't want somebody who does a really good job and is thorough and makes few mistakes? We have folks who are working, not us directly, but other people in the space working in specific areas like Surge Pack or other areas in medical fields. And some of the individuals with autism or neurodiverse needs make the fewest amount of mistakes. So who doesn't want that person who comes in, makes a few amount of mistakes? So deep focus and concentration. Again, who doesn't want somebody who comes in with that deep focus and concentration? Honest, loyalty, and integrity. We all want those in our employees or in our coworkers. Creativity, so distinctive imagination and expression of ideas. There was a study, and it's a little bit dated now. It's probably 10 years old from the Harvard Business Review that talked about when employers or agencies or companies hire individuals who think differently, they get better problem solving. They get more creative ideas, right? So if you think about that, if you have all the same people who think exactly the same way in your organization, you're probably going to get those exact same results. That's not saying that you don't want continuity and consistency, but you do want people to think about complex problems in different ways. So that was certainly an interesting article when it came to the Harvard Business Review. So visual skills. So again, thinking different about how you might look at problems, and maybe it's a visual representation or things like that. So, and I will say, just generally, it's not on here, but it's kind of woven into each one. We used to think, and when I say we, I don't mean necessarily myself or Autism Speaks. I'm just saying the royal we, the general we of the community and employers, and even in schools that that highly preferred interest, that might have been a barrier back in the day. But think about that if we match that strength of a highly preferred interest, and we all have those, right? So I maybe really prefer verbal processing and talking and doing presentations. Well, just think if you can match that skill with doing things like that within a company and a job. So if you have an individual, maybe you have even individuals now where you're like, man, they have a really good skill here, but maybe not over here. How do you match those skills to provide better opportunities for everybody within your company? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few moments. And then also how great folks like Tyler and his team can also help with some of those connectors too. So don't overlook somebody who might have a really great, deep knowledge and understanding for a specific area of your business or of your company. That could be really their sweet spot, and that might allow you to shift other folks to do other things. So that highly preferred interest, as long as it can work within your structure and within your business, is actually a value add and an asset. So if you think about somebody who maybe wants to do actuary science and they really love numbers and that's all they want to do, then you got to think, okay, what are the other components of that position that maybe aren't top tier, top 1, 2, and 3, and how do we move those along and make maybe a different customized employment opportunity. So that's kind of that expertise, in-depth knowledge, high-level skills. We probably have all ran into those folks, or maybe you're one of those individuals in general. I like to be a generalist, so I'm not one of those guys. So here, again, happy if anybody in the chat wants to jump in, but I just wanted to set the stage with a little bit of a thought starter and thinking about, and again, we'll get into some of our programming and our supports later. When we do what we would call a workplace profile report and go and look at an employer, we're really looking at varying things like communication load, things like mobility, not in the sense of an ADA accommodation, but really looking at are the rules of the road, if you will, clearly lined out. What makes a manufacturing space good for some people with autism? Before we get into this too much further, I do just want to talk about some of the myths that we typically hear. Maybe you've heard them, or maybe you have this perception. When we say all jobs are for all people, we really do mean that. And what has been in the past is some certain things have bubbled up of individuals with autism want to code software. Sure, some individuals with autism want to code software, or individuals with autism, they want to work in the cafeteria, cleaning tables and stocking shelves. Sure, some, right? But those are typically two big kind of bucket stereotypes, either of what they want to do or what people may think that they can do. The truth is, they should have all the opportunities, just like you and I would want all those opportunities. You have to match that strength. They have to be able to do the job, but part of that is going through and again, working with folks like us at Autism Speaks, or individuals, like Tyler at Vocational Rehabilitation and IowaWorks. We'll help you in those pieces of kind of matching those pieces up. But I would challenge us all, including myself at times. I have two really good teachers in my house, my own household, who help me challenge myself, thinking through these. What perceptions are we coming in with when it talks about, and we think about jobs and employment opportunities for individuals with autism, and then how do we make those opportunities more universal? And that will make it universal for everyone. So as an example, someone who may not want to talk as much, so this might not be a great fit for myself because I am a bit of a chatter. A manufacturing floor could be a really good fit for somebody who wants less verbal communication and the noise isn't an issue. So as an example, we did work with Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation on a really great project that's about 4 years in now and is sustaining in Southern Iowa. It was in a manufacturing plant. And we'll go through that case study in more details here in a few moments. But for some individuals with autism who didn't want a lot of the communication, or maybe communicated in a different way, really great environment because they use a lot of hand signals. A lot of verbal communication isn't at the forefront of that position. The manufacturing floor is visually marked out. Like, there were many good things for some individuals with autism, and the noise was minimal for a manufacturing floor. So how can you match an employee with a preferred interest? First thing we're always going to typically say, and Tyler, you're free to jump in if you want. Of course, I know this is my presentation, but I'm always happy to take all. We're going to start from our perspective as we're talking with an employer of really looking through, what's your job descriptions look like? What are you requiring of employees? And then what really is the job description? Y'all don't have to put it in the chat, but if you would even mentally raise your hand of, man, I've seen a job description and we have 25 things in there that somebody will never do or they'll do once annually, but they're all listed at the same. They're all listed in the same order or the same weight. And sometimes for individuals with autism and even those without, if we see a list of things, we're looking and weighting those all the same. So as an example, if you have to do routine training or routine maintenance on a piece of equipment, and it's listed as routine and not maybe more defined, we may think, yeah, we know what routine means. However, an individual looking at that who might be a bottom-up thinker or a concrete thinker might look at that and say, well, I don't know what routine means, and I don't even know if I can do the maintenance. And they may not even proceed to fill out an application. So one of the first things that we typically do is look at that job description and how it's worded and weighted. And then we look for ways to make changes so it's universal for everyone and makes it clearer for everyone. So let's say we get past that piece and then we're really dipping into, matching that employee with preferred interest. First of all, we should talk to the employee. Depending if they have a job coach or somebody from VR, we can certainly engage state agencies or nonprofits in that piece and ask them, what areas do they excel at? What do they like to do? And then we can really start to match them of, hey, you're really good at writing articles and doing reviews or auditing. This is a good area for you. And then you start to match your openings with the strengths of the individual. It takes a little more time, just being transparent. But you also, we find, and I think you can probably talk to a lot of folks who are in the strengths matching business. When you get that match, you also get employees who stay, you have less turnover, and better morale, because if they can do the job at a good performing level, it makes the job easier for everyone else. So, that's a simplistic way of matching preferred interests. There is more that goes into that that we can certainly dip into later. We talked a little bit about this already. How do you craft your current positions to utilize the strengths of all employees? I'm a big fan, and I'm sure most of the folks on here will do this. An annual review of job descriptions is pretty healthy. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable for the hiring managers if a talent acquisition or HR manager comes in and says, so let's talk about these job descriptions. Do you really need all these things? And our first reflex is typically, yes, I want to put everything in a job description because I don't want somebody to tell me that it's not part of their role or job description or job duties. There's other ways in which you can navigate that piece in order to make that job description more welcoming and inclusive and frankly, universally designed for all folks. Some of those things, again, could be looking at the weighting of the duties that you're asking them to do. Additionally, employers that we worked with, again, from manufacturing to healthcare to finance to hospitality, we will often put in our job descriptions, must be able to do this type of software, or must have this certification, or must be able to do this, when often that's part of the job onboarding process, and you'll gather that information after orientation as you go through. Now, I'm not saying to water down your requirements. If you really do need to know XY software at an experience level, of course you need to put that in there. I will say there's other ways to judge competency based off of just them telling you that they have it. You can give them a practice example or other things where they can show their skills in a different way. But if there is a way in which you can then highlight, you will gain these skills by week 4, and we provide the training for you, often that will lower a lot of those anxieties and those reluctance to apply for a job that they may not feel fully qualified for. So while we will streamline applications with hopefully fewer words, more concrete examples, some of the stuff will be a tweak, and it might be a little bit of an addition to provide more clarity for the applicant. I'm a big fan. If you're not doing this now and you have the ability to, providing interview questions in advance. And I will say, back in the day, it almost used to be, we were trying, and when I say again, I don't mean Autism Speaks, I just mean generally the hiring and interview practicing team. It was almost like we were trying to catch people in an interview. I want my folks to be prepared when they come to talk to me. That's a different way, and also in which to judge, or not judge, but like, are they vested? Are they really researching? I provide all my interview questions ahead of time for individuals who might interview with openings for my team, because I want them to understand, what I'm looking for, and I want thoughtful, detailed responses. I also provide, so, this is going to dip into that next bullet, current hiring practices of examining policies and procedures. So not only will I provide the interview questions ahead of time, I also will ask them if they need accommodations ahead of time. Again, you don't have to put it in the chat or raise your hand, but if you think about it to yourself and you're a talent acquisition or a hiring manager, do you do that as part of your current practice, or do you wait until somebody asks you for accommodations? I would make the case, and I think Tyler would probably agree, if you do that ahead of time, then they don't actually even have to disclose anything to you other than, you know what, is it okay if I'm on camera for 10 minutes and then I turn my camera off so I can focus in on the if it's a virtual interview, so I can focus in on the questions and conversation? Sure. I also put that in the directions of, I would love for you to be on camera for introductions, and if it's more comfortable for you after that, please feel free to turn your camera off, but then please turn it on after, before we wrap up. Those types of things, because I also want to see interaction and reactions, because that's how I process information at times. So just providing within your current structure and within your current system some of those adjustments is going to make your workplace more welcoming and inclusive for all individuals, because it provides them the kind of some of the rules and the guidance that you're looking to give to them. Additionally, I would say I've seen really, really great detail-oriented onboarding processes. And I've seen some who say, show up at this warehouse at this time and day one will start. Again, we may be okay with that, but if you think about that in general from an employee standpoint, they're already probably nervous about starting a new position. What if we provided them just a little bit more scheduling for that day one and then week one of, here's who you're going to meet with? Again, most employers are pretty good, but there's still some gaps there. And then even providing additional information, not overload, but a good one pager around those, onboarding and, in coming into inclusive workplaces. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's who your trainer or mentor is. Here's your break schedule, your lunch schedule. Here's the information we hope you gather by the end of the week. So it gets a little trickier sometimes. And again, depending on space and opportunity, some individuals and employers work with temp agencies. So that's another partner you're going to need to help upskill. Again, which we're happy to help do as well, because often an employee, maybe if they have autism or another neurodiversity, they're like, well, I got hired by X company, but now this company's contacting me about that job. So it's really just being communication and be clear about your communication. I like to say clear is kind. So the clearer you can be with individuals, the kinder it will be for them to understand your process. Other current hiring practices that you could examine again is, can you highlight varying things outside of financial? Make no mistake, friends, everybody needs to make money and get paid. But often what we hear from autistic employees and their families and caregivers is they want to know some of those other pieces about culture. What's the culture like? Oh, you know what? We get every other Friday, half day Friday, whatever your culture may be, right? Or it's casual Friday, or you know what? We donate to these charities because they're important to us. Or in some businesses, if they're having a problem maybe with transportation, getting back and forth to maybe it's an industrial park or maybe it's a healthcare complex, they'll say, we offer free bus passes as long as you document it. Well, that technically is a financial benefit, but people think about that a little bit differently. That really is a cultural benefit because you're valuing that employee to get to work on time. So I would say also go back through and look whatever you're comfortable sharing public, because I get sometimes you want to keep some of that stuff once people get onboarded, is really looking at how are we recruiting and where is the current pipeline of talent coming from, and how do we broaden that Well, you're going to need to broaden that by looking at how you're talking to individuals, in this case with autism, in a different way. And then how are you presenting your opportunities in a different way? And again, we work with folks all over the country, and what we really like to do is connect them back to local talent markets and VR agencies and state agencies, specifically around these are the skills and strengths. And so it's almost like a quick job match. It's always some time in it, but quicker. And it really does allow you to understand more about, from a workforce development side, what that employer needs. And then from the employer side, what the workforce and VR agencies are looking to provide to you, and what kind of matching that they can help with. And we've had really good success that we'll talk about later in a statewide initiative in Georgia, and then a initiative in Iowa. We have other initiatives. Those are just the two that are in this example. And that's also why you should diversify your talent pool at recruitment and community partners. I will say, after we had trained and worked with the plant in Southern Iowa, actually a lot of their employees really were drawn to, I never thought about, maybe my uncle could work here, or maybe my neighbor should work here. Because once they saw it as a possibility, it opened up not only recruitment for obviously individuals with autism, but other individuals as well, based off of some of the recommendations. If you think about veterans, or if you think about other populations that might really just need a little additional support. And I will tell you, more often than not, when we train companies, we'll tell them, we believe you're going to have probably people who will come out and disclose after the training. And often they'll say, I don't think so, we would know. And more often than not, once they go through training, individuals will come and say, you know what, I have ADHD, or I have dyslexia, and this was really helpful, so thank you. So although we're Autism Speaks, that opens the conversation for a lot of your other employees. So diversifying your talent pool certainly includes working with state agencies, such as vocational rehabilitation, also not-for-profits that are doing some more good work in those areas, Easter Seals, Best Buddies. There's obviously Autism Speaks. There's a lot of folks that can connect you back into those community partners, and they're often under-recruited from. And then there are, if you're looking for individuals with advanced degrees through college or technical schools or JUCOs, a lot of college campuses have programs for twice exceptional or other individuals coming out of their programming, and they're desperately looking to connect back to employers, whether it's in finance, or if it's in IT and other technical spaces. And we're happy to help, as needed, connect you back to those folks, and obviously utilize those state and local resources, of course. So, Tyler, I'm going to take a beat and just check if there's any questions. If there are, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'm going to get a glass of, not a whole glass, but a drink of water real quick. So, what we work with here at Autism Speaks, we lovingly call WIN, or Workplace Inclusion Now. It's a workforce development program for employers, job seekers, and community stakeholders to promote inclusive workplace culture, in which obviously autistic adults can thrive, but all employees can thrive. And I'll drop it in the chat before we wrap today. We just publicized a story from Georgia School Nutrition Association, which is a statewide initiative. And they're talking about how it's what we've worked with them on and implemented for them wasn't just good for individuals with neurodiverse needs, it was good for all their employees. And that really is where we drive our programming to. Obviously, we're going to focus in on autism and how we can help support that individual. But more often than not, the recommendations that we will make, yeah, Candy, I'll dip back into that in a little bit, and just generally talk about some of those job descriptions before we wrap up. That's a great call. I'll make sure to try to highlight a few more of those. And then, of course, I will always give the caveat. It really does depend on the specific job, but certainly happy to dip into that here in a little bit. So core components for us. We have online digital trainings. I will say, hopefully this will make the majority, if not all of you on this call, relatively happy. Our digital trainings for employers or for the community or for state agencies or nonprofits or providers in the area, we don't charge for those. They are available because we want individuals to be trained, right? So we want you to get the information. For employers, typically, and I'll cover this in a little bit with more so what's in the courses. For employers, we recommend 2 trainings. There's one for HR managers and one for coworkers. If you're a manager, we recommend you take both. So, and obviously, if you're a coworker with non-people managing responsibilities, you would take that coworker course. That provides good foundational information with knowledge checks in there to make sure that obviously we're gaining information. All the trainings are available in Spanish, and these are online. You can start, stop, and come back to them. They'll at the end there'll be a QR code you can scan if you want more interest. It goes to me and my team. We're not going to spam you. We're just going to reach back out and see how we can help you. So that's really exciting. And we have parent courses in a training for parents who have individuals with higher support needs but still need employment. And then we have other courses for community members, and we do have courses for individuals with autism also in there. I will give just a blanket kind of cautionary tale. We always provide the trainings to employers, obviously for coworkers and HR managers. We also provide those trainings for, they're called Navigating Your Differences, which are geared for individuals with autism. That should never be assigned to an individual with autism just because you know that they have autism. They may never need that course. That's just there as an additional support. I will say it's actually helpful for managers at times because there's checklists in there about how to maybe present a solution to your employer if you're having trouble in a specific area. So before I go on, just generally, we have multiple individuals as contributors and reviewers to our material. So we have individuals with autism who help review courses. We have parents and family members who help review. One of our big research partners is Virginia Commonwealth University. They've been doing employment for the better part of 35 to 40 years. So they help develop our some of our content. We don't do this alone or in a vacuum. We have businesses who help provide feedback of courses and information. So we try to get all oars in the water to make sure we get a well-rounded product. And then if if applicable, i.e. if it makes sense, we do what we would call a workplace profile report. That's an in-depth job description analysis, and it is in person and an environmental review, development partners, and so forth. That's not part of the digital training package, just to be clear, but happy to have some conversations if that's something you may be interested in. And not every place is going to need that. We meet companies where they are. And I will also say, if you're working with another collaborator or partner, but you need training or you need the other piece, we're happy to work with other folks. There is more than enough space and time and work for all people to work together. And that's really actually the approach that we would like to take is if you're already working with somebody, but we can be of service, please let us help you. We're happy to do so. So this is what we're talking about for businesses. These are the typical 2 trainings. So, you're about an hour and 15 minutes if you're a manager, because you would take both of those courses. And obviously we cover autism-related conditions, disclosure in the workplace, accommodations and adjustments. So we talk about some of those accommodation and adjustment pieces. We also talk about some of the inclusive hiring and management development practices. For coworkers, benefits of an inclusive workplace. This is by far probably they're all effective, but getting that baseline of understanding for coworkers is pretty important. And typically we like to shoot for, let's say you have 100 people in your company. We'd really love to see that 80% mark be trained, because that provides a good foundation for all employees, right? Everybody has that kind of, we'd love 100, but we're also realist. Sometimes to get everybody trained through is a bit of a challenge. So we'd love to see 80%. And it really just, again, kind of makes sure everybody's speaking the same language, but then also takes away some of the questions ahead of time. And what we find with employers sometimes is that they just don't want to make a mistake, so then they may not even start. We're going to all do the best we can with the information we have and set a really good foundation, and know that if there is a misstep, you can adjust and you can adapt and you can go forward, just like you would with any other hiring or recruitment strategy. These are for community members. Again, these could be very helpful for anybody maybe on your HR or talent acquisition team. I will say the welcoming students, I think there was a couple technical or community colleges in the chat. This is really geared towards individuals at, it could be probably be used in high school if you have a syllabi or a syllabus, and but really geared towards those post-secondary program pieces to how to design your environment for universal learning. Again, these courses are available. Registration's required, but there's no cost to take them. You just have to register within our system. But those welcoming students with autism and related conditions really is for faculty members, or maybe you have a program on campus. And how do you make sure that your material is accessible for all? Things like scanning your learning environment for barriers to learning. Looking at, let's say that somebody wants to be a welder, but they're not getting, you're only giving text information and no other ways in which to access the learning skills. Well, how else can you present that information? There could be some visual ways and other ways in which you can do that. So again, just knowing that not everybody learns things in the same way. How do we provide that information? Things, simple things that we often may forget are the videos captioned, or et cetera, things like that. Direct service providers, that really is for, job coaches, VR counselors potentially. And it really is just, how do you help an individual with autism who is going into workspace or maybe going into post-secondary? How do you help to advocate, help them learn to advocate for themselves for needs? Because we know when individuals with autism can advocate for themselves, that the outcomes are better. And so we wanted to provide some support for individuals who might be in that space. Here's the two courses I referenced earlier, and this is for job seekers, or you could already have a job. Again, you just wouldn't assign this to an individual if you knew they had autism within your workspace, because they may never need this course. Unless you assigned it to everybody, you shouldn't selectively assign it to individuals either. These by far are our longest courses. They're about an hour and a half because there's so much information in there. They can be taken with a guardian or a support person if needed. But really, we'll go through self-advocacy in the workplace. So how do you get your needs met in the workplace? How do you disclose in the workplace if you need to? So if you need to tell your manager, what does that look like? Guided scans of the workplace. I will say this is good. This is some of the sheets that I said might be good for hiring or talent acquisition managers just in general. It's also good if if you end up going to the, a few individuals who helped with this course said, I use this if I go to a grocery store and I have a sensory challenge, because I can walk through that as well. So it will go through things, as far as scans as executive function, sensory overload, communication, things like that, just to really help build out supports for advocating for your individual needs with your employer. So again, there's pieces built into that. The two pieces are kind of broken out into communication load. So manufacturing, if you remember back to the second or third slide, we talked about sometimes that could be less communication, verbal communication. So the examples in that course are a bit different. And then the customer-facing one has an example of maybe where an interaction with a customer, didn't go well, and how you can help adjust that. So again, really great courses. These are also, again, I'm going to keep saying it, there's no cost to take these courses. We want as many people to have them as possible. And what we do find is, while we may ask employers to take coworkers and managers, often they will end up taking the other courses in the series because they just want to absorb that knowledge. And we love that. It's such a great thing. You'll get a badge and a certificate at the end. So if you want to, share that, that's cool too. We love that. So let's talk about in applicable terms and so forth. So this is the Georgia School Nutrition program. Let's see, we're in 2024, so we're about 2 years in. We initially selected 3 schools, middle, high school, and an elementary as pilot locations. That really was to serve as blueprinting industries in those schools for them. So then the whole state could be activated. We started with around 100 employees for training. So they all took the digital training, coworkers, and it was so great to see. They took the training before we came down to do a physical site visit. And they had all their certificates hanging on the walls in all the schools. It was great to see. They were really jazzed up. And I will say, this environment can be really, really nice for some individuals with autism. Just like, again, we don't always want to work in an environment, nor does every individual want to work in a school cafeteria. But if you look at what we worked on them with and what we were identifying them is these non-financial benefits that we were talking about earlier. Your schedule set basically a year ahead of time outside of maybe weather conditions. And outside of recently in Georgia where they had some pretty horrific weather, they typically don't have a lot of snow days, right? Or things like that. So if you're looking at it from a predictability standpoint, from an autistic individual standpoint, and maybe their support system who might help provide transportation, knowing that schedule ahead of time, a year in advance, or even 6 months in advance, you know what, I'm never going to work a Saturday, I'm never going to work a Sunday, and I'm out of here by 3:30. Wow, that's a non-financial benefit for many individuals who would like that roteness. We selected those implementation team. We did their workplace profile report. Some of the things that we did ask them to do is, we asked them to create visual and video day in the lives of, right? So it's really hard sometimes to explain what a job is on text to people if they're visual thinkers and learners. So, and we got that idea, frankly, from reviewing their website, and their school busing system had a day in the life of a bus driver. And so we recommended that they did that, a day in the life of nutrition worker. And that allows individuals to see it in a different light. That's where it was also good for individuals who may also not speak English as a first language, because they're not having to read through everything. They can actually visualize themselves in that role. Same with what we asked them to do by putting in some more visual supports in conjunction with words. So if you can't read all the words, but you can understand the picture of what the sequence is, you can still do the job and be successful. And so, again, did the profile report. They implemented almost all the recommendations. There were some things around application itself. Since they're a district, they couldn't necessarily change the system in which applicants went into. But what they ended up doing is creating alternate pathways like job fairs and things specifically. Or if you are having trouble, here's a direct contact person to connect with to help you fill out your application. Because again, if you're looking at that initial step of even completing an application, often that could be the barrier, is that online system. And if you have a question, many places don't even allow you to ask a question, or it may be not easy to find who that support person would be. So I would always recommend, if possible, and it wouldn't overwhelm your system, how can they get in touch with somebody if they have a question about that application process? We shared on podcasts and at conferences and within state. And then again, during NDEAM for us, we actually released a national story with them, highlighting the work they've done. So far now, that one district has 112 schools with about 800 employees. They are all fully implemented and starting to hire. They've hired a good chunk of folks. I'm not even going to try to toss a number out just because I'm not sure, because it will change. But they did that through our connection. We connected them back to their local community, including some nonprofits in the area, and now they're matching. So when we talked about earlier, how do you match those skills to the openings? That's what they're doing now. That nonprofit's like, oh, I know that they need these skills, and they almost have these skills, but they'll train them on that. And so we can get them over to provide that opportunity. And frankly, right before I just came on today, we got another district starting to enroll. So like we're fully going statewide now. The goal is to get all of them. And then the goal is to come back into other states, Iowa, Texas, Ohio, all the states. Like that blueprint then will serve for other blueprints for other nutrition programs throughout the state, just like we exported our manufacturing work to other states throughout the country using that as a blueprint. Speaking of our humble Iowa beginnings, so We started this during COVID, which was a bit tricky, but also probably the right approach because it allowed us to innovate and think about things a little bit differently because we had to, as the whole world did, right? So, and I'm about done, so I'll jump into questions here in the chat, Tyler. I know we're getting about a quarter till. So, we train their entire floor. I will tell you, the plant manager, you know, initially was a little bit like, I don't think this is going to work, but they loved their CEO. They really wanted it to work. And they said, we'll try it. We have a post video of him saying, I'm so glad that I was wrong, right? That it worked out because they have really great employees. And what we worked with them on is looking at shift structure. Again, this won't work in every industry or every business, but one of the key recommendations for them that we asked them to do is, could you break a 8-hour shift into 2 4-hour shifts for a myriad of reasons? It could be workplace stamina. That individual may not be able to fully work 40, but they're really great at working 20. They could have benefit considerations, so they want to make sure to see where their benefits line up, and so maybe they need a little bit more time to ramp up, which, by the way, did happen. They did have individuals who started part-time and are now full-time. But we also know that by providing that alternate direction, it opened up their recruitment to other folks, retirees, again, veterans, other folks who might have similar considerations, but would have maybe not looked at that type of opportunity in the same way. And their response was, sure, the machine doesn't care who's on the machine. So they were very open to that, which was a great relief. And that really was how they initially got started. You didn't have to be part-time, so it's not like they were making people being part-time. They just said, if part-time is a need for you, we'll allow it, and then it allowed other folks to come in. VR, vocational rehabilitation, is like their #1 sourcing partner for that area. Jamie and her team do a remarkable job down out of that office, and again, we've shared their story both nationally, locally. We've highlighted it, internally at the governor and a whole bunch of different things, because we want people to understand, with the right supports, all individuals with autism can have the opportunity to be employed, and it makes all businesses better. They have 2 other plants that we're now starting to work into. So in other states, they're not in Iowa. And those plants will be a little bit different, right? So it's not going to be the exact same, but it's going to be pretty close. So I'm going to leave this here. If you're interested, again, I'm not going to call and sell you. I'm going to call and ask how we can help. And please take out your phone. It's a simple interest form. It goes to my team. We'll reach out and schedule time to talk, about 20 to 30 minutes. We don't do this in a vacuum, though. If we are working, as in this case, let's say we're working with another Iowa employer, we are going to engage, once we get training and those types of things done, we're going to engage folks from Iowa Workforce Development and Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation, or other nonprofits, Easter Seals, or other agencies that are doing supported employment and those types of things. We know it takes everybody rowing in that same direction in order to close that gap that we talked about on slide 2. And again, just gently, I want opportunities for all individuals, including the ones in my own home. So as far as looking at how you can adjust and navigate a job description, because I'll get into that, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen after the next slide so I can see if anybody's on or off camera. Things you want to look at when you get in, and again, this is very high level, simplistic job description, is really looking at what unnecessary words you may have in there. And often, as an example, it could be a carryover from 30 to 40 years ago, strangely enough. We've seen things from like an administrative role, must be able to push 65, 70 pounds. Do they? Like, if that's for real, then leave it in there. But if they don't, there's really no need to keep that in there. That's in a job description. You can reduce that. Things such as being very clear with your language of what you want them to do. So trying to think of one off the top of my sometimes the language is too vague because we're trying to cover too many things. So things like must be a good team player. Can you provide an example of what that looks like? Yeah, drivers. Yeah, thank you. Driver license as a requirement, also a good example. So often we'll see in job descriptions, and again, Tyler and I both know, and you all know what you're trying to drive to. It must be a good team player. I saw really, and I can't share it because it's not mine, but an employer will work. They have really great examples of must be this. So let's say must be Iowa nice. Like we'll use an Iowa nice example. Many times employers will just stop at that line. Must be Iowa nice. That allows everybody else to try to fill in what Iowa nice means. This employer actually said, and it wasn't in Iowa, by the way. That's why I'm using Iowa nice. But let's say, let's be Iowa, must be Iowa nice. The very next line was, we consider that to be ... right? They made it very clear of what that meant to them. So somebody could visualize that in a job description and in requirements. Also with requirements, often we put all the requirements and skills together. I would recommend like, these are required, these are skills, because skills can be acquired, right? But if you put them all together, they all look like they're required. So if you can break the skills and the requirements up, that's helpful. Again, without like seeing an actual job description in top, plain language, yes, absolutely. Clear as kind, right? So less words, typically better words. And then if you do have something, what we try to let employers know is we don't want to change your vibe, your culture that way. We want you to get more people who fit that. But in order to do that, you might have to tell them what that means. And often we use marketing language versus like communication language for jobs, if that makes sense. I got one more slide and this is just, again, I'll send this out. And I know it's recorded, but Tyler, I'll make sure you have this if you want to send it. This is a free resource as well. It is available in Spanish. It is national. So, as an example, let's say you had somebody on your team, not with autism, but maybe you have a BRG or an ERG that focuses on individuals with disabilities, or maybe you have an employee resource group for individuals who have loved ones with disabilities. They can email this line about autism, right? So this isn't a general disability number, it's specifically to autism, but let's say you had a team member who maybe recently got diagnosed as an adult. That happens more often now. They can certainly reach out to us and we'll point them in the direction of adult resources for newly diagnosed adults. Or maybe you have a grandma or a mom who their son or grandson just got diagnosed and they're not sure where to start. They can email or chat this line and they will actually look for resources in that area. So it doesn't have to be in Iowa, but it can be anywhere, and they'll look for that through some of the tragedies that have happened with weather lately. They'll also help provide some of those weather related, like, hey, here's what the governor's office is saying in the state, etc. So again, free resources. Now I'm going to stop sharing. I'm happy to take any questions. You can also email me directly if you have questions. Otherwise, if you want to fill out that form, it's fine too. I do want to thank Tyler and his team who do remarkable work. We are big fans of Iowa Workforce and Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation because we need all systems to work together for individuals. And in order to do that, we need to have more conversations like this and to provide more tools for employers.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. If there's no questions, then we will end early, give you guys 6 minutes back into your day. Josh, appreciate all the resources and the presentation today that you're sharing with everybody. When you do send that out to us, we will share the recording and with the registrants as well as the stuff that you share.
Absolutely. And again, if anybody wants to reach out, we're happy to chat.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Take care.